Hello everyone, and welcome once again to the Ventures Travel Club television show. We are on our way to Lillehammer, and of course that means that we are traveling in Norway, right Betty?
That is right, and we must remember Lillehammer means little hammer.
Little Hammer, that's right. Now listen to our guide now, Carol, as she explains about this area.
It's not big enough to have all of the competitions in the city itself, but you'll find that several of the halls are right in Lillehammer, and we'll be visiting that area. Then the mountains around Lillehammer held, of course, the slalom, all the downhill competitions, and some of the ice hockey and speed skating were then held in Hamar. I think I mentioned earlier how the Council of Lillehammer wanted this Olympic game to not damage the city itself too much. The earlier Winter Olympics, I think, were in Chamonix and Tignes, and they realized that this is going to cost us a lot of money if we get the Winter Olympics, because we shall have to improve our roads, our connections from Oslo, for instance, the capital. So it did mean a huge investment and a huge improvement in the road net leading from Oslo to Lillehammer. They set in extra trains also, so the railroad was used very much. But they wanted this to become the Winter Olympics that were the most environmentally friendly. They wanted to build buildings. The arenas were supposed to be so that they didn't become eyesores, that they could be used later by the local population and not spoil the countryside. So when they cut down the trees, it was very, very restrictive. If they decided to cut a bit more, then they would be heavily fined. So all the ski slopes are very beautifully integrated into the nature. No more trees than absolutely necessary were taken away. In the city centre itself, they, as I say, were given grants so that they could paint their houses, so that it would be newly painted and sparkling, but they were not allowed to paint their houses in other colours than the traditional colours. All the garish shop signs were taken away. Everything should look very nice and neat. And of course a lot of the shops in Lillehammer on the main street, the shops that were selling maybe lamps or kitchen equipment, turned into restaurants during the Winter Olympics. So it was very difficult to find a way around because it didn't look at all like it usually does. And then of course after the Olympics, then everything went back to normal, but they put in psychiatrists and psychologists to help the locals get back into a normal daily life, because what you can't imagine the amount of people in this little town, because it really isn't a very large town, and the city centre was cram-packed with people for the days that the Olympic went on, a couple of weeks only. But there was a fantastic atmosphere here. It was very, very cold. There was lots of snow, which they were a bit worried about because it didn't look as though it was going to be a very snowy winter, so they were slightly worried. But it did become a fantastic winter with lots of snow and very, very cold. And you've got to imagine happy people walking around in winter clothes. All the Norwegians were in national clothes almost, at least, and with the traditional sweaters and so on. You've never seen so many sweaters outside the sweater shops before. And everybody had got a cowbell. So there was a sound of cowbells wherever you went. Everybody was also waving the Norwegian flag, no matter which nationality they had. They were waving the Norwegian flags. And there were thousands and thousands of people on the street there. And the citizens of Lillehammer had been preparing for this for at least 4 years. A lot of them decided, well, we're definitely going to sell hot dogs or something. We're going to become millionaires at this. And a lot of people did start restaurants just outside the city centre, but nobody went there. Everybody stood and lined up for hours in the cold, would rather go into one of the restaurants downtown than go just off the beaten track. Everybody wanted to be part of the party. So quite a few people went bankrupt, but quite a few people made a fortune. But the atmosphere was fantastic, I can assure you. It was just unbelievable, because cram-packed in this little town, you'd find people struggling to get anywhere, and yet being happy and friendly. Nobody was grouchy, everybody was happy. And the Norwegians themselves did a fantastic job of being positive. Wherever they were, whatever competition was going on, they would cheer everybody. They would cheer even people who hadn't got the least chance and who had come from small countries where they'd been skiing long distance and were used to not seeing a single soul on the track. All the long distance track was covered with people on the sides that were cheering everybody. Well, maybe everybody except the Swedes. The poor Swedes. But then they won the ice hockey match, so revenge. On the other hand, the Swedes were very much in on it, because they took care of the catering and also the coffee out. All the public toilets came from Sweden, and so did all the cafes. And they too, of course, this was also very restricted. All the paper cups and everything had to be recyclable. So everything was very much considered, well, they really had to think about what they were doing, and had to be good for the environment, or at least as little damaging as possible for the environment. The toilets were something else. They got these huge tents with rows of cubicles with toilets, and then they've got fairly hot water gushing underneath the toilets. So you didn't flush, it was just simply a gush of fairly hot water gushing through constantly. Very effective. And then of course going into cleaning tanks at some point. We're going to start our visit of Lillehammer with the open air museum, Mayhaugen. And after we have been around Mayhaugen, we will take you up to the ski jump, and well, you'll just have to imagine all the people and the opening ceremony and everything. Straight ahead of us we have the Hospital of Lillehammer. We don't want to visit that though. Even though hospital care is of course paid through our social security, you don't have to pay anything even as a tourist if you need to get treatment here. But just take my word for it.
I'll take her word for it. I hope we don't have to wind up in the hospital. Anyway, it's kind of nice, so you know, as a tourist, that if you do have problems, it's already taken care of. That's pretty good. You know, this is one big place with this museum. I mean, it covers quite a few acres, and it took quite some time. In fact, they're still working on it, even as we're visiting it, and it's really a beautiful spot. Not only is it located nicely, but the view from here down to the other part of Lillehammer, I think, is really quite magnificent. So they picked a good spot for it.
I was going to say, how did he happen to determine that spot? Did he own some land there for
that? I really don't know.
My name is Lieve, and I'm going to show Lieve. Yes, I'm going to show you the museum. Have anyone been here before?
No.
No. Happens sometimes that people coming back. This museum was founded in 1887, so it was the first open-air museum in north of Europe. And it was founded by a dentist. He lived down in Lillehammer, downtown, called Anders Sandvik. And he didn't have an education that would say that he would start a museum, but he had a very big interest in taking care of old things and houses. So he started to collect the things and houses from the valley, north from Lillehammer, the Gudbrandsdalen. And he brought things with him back to Lillehammer. And in the beginning, he started his museum in his garden. So when he had 5 houses in his garden, it was no room anymore. So then he asked the community if maybe he could get another space or a place where he could move the houses and build further. So then he got this place, and then he could move the houses and build further. So today we have 150 houses here on the old part of the museum. And that is built up like a little village. So we have everything that belongs to a village 100 years ago. That's very important because we want to show you the truth, not only the beautiful things, okay? And we're still building out because we have a new part of the museum behind the main building. And that's our time, yeah. So 3 weeks ago we opened the house from 1970. So I can go to the museum now and look how my parents used to live when I was a little child. It's really nice, but the people in Lillehammer, they doesn't really understand it, why we're doing this. Because we want to have it now, because in 20 years it's too late to collect these things from 1970. That's why. Is there any questions so far? No? When you have a question, then please ask me. If I'm walking too fast, tell me. This house was built in 1640, and it's been the house belonged to the priest in the valley in Vågå. And this house is also a farm, so this is only the house where he was living. We're going to go inside, and then you have to watch out because it's a lot of place to sit down here, but you're not allowed to sit on the chairs. Okay? And you're not able to touch anything, or also not the wallpaper. Okay? Then we go inside. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, then you're standing in the living room that the priest used to have and used to use. And this is a big room, and that shows us that this priest had a lot of visitors in the house. He also had 3 more rooms. It's one kitchen. Behind the kitchen is the sleeping room, and here you have an office where he could work and prepare his work for the church. So he had a lot of rooms. But what's very special with the priest in Norway is that the priests were no Norwegian. He was a Danish, because we belonged to Denmark for 400 years. So our university was in Copenhagen. So then, if you want to do education, you had to travel to Denmark, and there was not many people who could pay for education. So then always the priests coming to Norway come from Denmark, and they brought their culture with them to Norway. So that's 2 different types of culture. So what you see in this room is a lot of things brought with him to Norway. And it's only the candle, what's the name in English? Candles? Yeah. All them is made in Norway by Norwegian people, but the rest here is from abroad. So the wallpaper, it's looking like Grobbela, but it's not Grobbela, it's just painted.
Looks like tapestry.
Yeah, it's painted, and it's made in Holland, brought to Norway from Holland. And if you look at the pictures on the wallpaper, it describes a day in the life for a rich man. So he's eating breakfast, he's having lunch, he's in a boat up there, he's walking, going for a walk, and up here he's talking to his girlfriend probably. So it's nothing that a farmer would say that is necessary to do in a day, because for farming it was common to work.
Well, it looks like he had a pretty nice house there.
I would think it's elegant.
Yeah, that wallpaper,
Yeah.
all hand painted. That was really something. And there, well, I think she said there were 3 rooms here in the home, but and kind of a little dark back there. So kind of dark
hard
when
to
you're doing
see,
your cooking,
yeah.
unless you had a big fire, huh?
I don't understand. I mean, I don't know, not understand. What kind of wood what trees are prevalent? Would it be the pine?
I think so. I'm not sure. That's a good question.
Well, it's just, I wanted a good answer.
Well, try somewhere else.
By the church. This church is moved from Lom, north in the valley, from a place named Garmo. That's why this church is named Garmo Kyrka. And this is a stave church. Do you know how you build a stave church? Stave construction. You know that? Yeah. Posts. Yeah. Yeah. And they also have the barks up there again. So that is a stave construction. Why it's a stave is that this post in Norwegian is named a stav. That's why it's a stav church. Okay? And this history from this church is very special because it's like that this part of the church is built in year 1200 with the fundament. And the first church that they built in Garmo was built in 1100 because it didn't have a fundament. It were no good after 100 years. Then they built a new church with a fundament. And they were very happy with this church until 1730. But then it was too small for the community, so they built 2 transepts out. So you had a cross church, and at the same time you built the windows into the church. And it was very modern again, and you have room for everyone who belonged to the church. And in 1880, 150 years later, they weren't satisfied anymore. They wanted a new church, a modern church, bigger church with heating inside of it. So then they decided to take this church apart, sell the pieces on an auction, so they could get money for a new church. So they took it apart, sold the church in an auction, and built a new church. So this church was lost. So why is it here today? That's the question. Yeah. It's a man. He lived up in the valley, in this area where this church used to stand. And he thought it was really a pity that you take a church apart and just sell it, because it's culture. And the people living up there, they thought that he was strange, because he thought that. But he went to this auction, he bought all the pieces that he could buy. But he was not a rich man, so he couldn't afford much. So then he started to write down the names from everyone who bought a piece. And later he went to the dentist, the founder of this museum, and they decided to collect the church together again. So in 1921, the church stood finished here on Maihaugen again. So this is one of the 29 stave churches that we still have in Norway. We used to have about 900, now only 25. This bench here. Ja, det noen som har veldig dårlig til bein, så kan du sette seg ned. Hvor mange er det da? Jeg var 14 stykker. Ja. Yeah. Still place here in the front if you want to have a seat. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
A museum in Sweden, but it belonged to a place in Norway, a church in Norway, and that is the church where the dentist used to go when he was a child, where he was baptized as a child. So he used to sit in the church where he came from, looking up to this carpet every Sunday. That's nice. Yeah, so that's nice for the museum here. But I want you to try to imagine how it was like in this church when we go back in time, before the Reformation in 1536. Shall we go back to 1500, like that? Or 1450?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. We don't want to, but I want to do it with the script. Okay? Because then I had to try to imagine that the walls are still here, on both sides, and you don't have any windows here. Only openings like this on this wall for some light. So it's still darker than it's today. And it's no benches, so everyone had to stand. And it's no wooden floor, it's just a dirt floor in the church.
It was only for men?
The women had to do this race through the town.
Oh, that's right. The women had to race
It's
through the
even
town.
tougher.
Well, suppose somebody has a small neck, then what?
Then it hurt worse.
It hurts, yes. I was just going to say that. It's hurt a bit more.
Oh, you try it?
No, thanks. I think I'd live without that.
You just slip it on there.
Maybe put it on and you take a shot of it, see?
Well, that was the stocks, and men had their head put into the stock like that, and then there was I forgot what it was, but the women were chased down the street for something or another.
That was their form of punishment.
I
in
think
those
that
days,
was it.
huh?
Yeah. Anyway, again, now we can see what a beautiful place this is, and all of these buildings, of course, from different years, moved in from various places in Norway to make this beautiful outdoor museum. Betty, if you lived out on the farm in the old days in Norway, you know what you would have for breakfast? Now, you got up, you had breakfast about 6 a.m., and you would have flatbrød or flatbread, and you know what that's made of, right?
Rye bread, usually, rye wheat.
Yeah.
Do you call it? You don't call it rye wheat. It's flour.
It's
Rye
right, and it's
flour.
made into a bread,
Okay.
right? And then, and you had a little butter with that, and then you had gamelost, which is a pungent cheese, and whey soup, or you had the flatbread and red and white, mind you, goat's cheese, and a milky gruel. Doesn't that sound
No,
good?
That's not too much different than I have for breakfast. I really mean that.
You
I
like
have
that,
the
huh?
bread, but it's not that bread, with
Yeah.
toast, and I make oatmeal, which is the gruel.
Okay.
But I don't have the cheese.
You don't have the cheese.
No.
All right. Okay, for lunch was around 10 o'clock, and they had a barley meal, porridge, and milk. And then the afternoon meal, which was at 3 o'clock, was like salted meat, pork, peas, and cabbage, porridge made with curdled milk, and turnip groats. Also cured pork, sausage, and flatbread. Sausages made with groats, flatbread, and milky gruel.
What's groat?
I think that's a...
You don't mean goat.
No, groat. Groat. Anyway, and after that, you
Didn't answer the question.
I'm
What's
not
groat?
sure. I'm not sure.
Boy,
You
oh
have to
boy,
look
do
that
you
up.
pass by that real fast.
Vegetable soup, flatbread, and gruel, herring and whey soup. And the afternoon meal varied from day to day. Potatoes, though, were not introduced into the diet until the 19th century. Now, the evening meal was about 8 p.m., and for that, it was barley meal, porridge, and milk. So there was a lot of barley meal porridge.
milk.
I think groat is a kind of a
Be careful.
yeah, I think it's kind of a wheat, like a kernel. I think it is. I'm not sure. Maybe it's like grits and groats, huh?
Well, it must have been something very available, because if they had it that often. And I see they had a lot of meals. They didn't
Yeah, there were
just
4
have
meals
like
a day.
we do. And the big meal was like
3 o'clock in the
Europeans do.
afternoon.
They
Mhm.
eat their big meal in the afternoon.
In the autumn time, of course, that's when the slaughtering time was, and there was a lot of fresh meat and food made from blood. But otherwise, salted food was the usual fare. And the most common way to preserve meat and fish, of course, was by salting and drying. So, yeah. And
I've
pardon
had
me?
that blood cheese. Have you eaten blood cheese?
No, but I had the blood sausage once in Ireland.
Yeah.
And thank you, but
Thank
no
you,
thank
but
you.
yeah, you know, and it isn't just in your mind. At least I had that too.
The taste was
and
different.
the taste was.
Yeah.
I'm with you all the way on that. No, but then when I found out what it was, then of course I knew
That you didn't really like it,
Yeah.
right? The menfolk had to rest after the meals and before starting to work again, and the workday thus had its own rhythm of work, food, and rest from early in the morning to late at night.
Same as the women,
Yeah, right, because they were the ones
But
making all that gruel.
right?
But do you suppose they made one great big pot of it and just let it cook all day?
Well, but I think they had to do it for each time. I would.
You
I
wanted
don't
fresh
know.
gruel,
I
right?
didn't- Yeah.
Okay, well.
Oh.
Anyway, the tourists can sometimes enjoy some of this here at the museum as well. So
I marvel at the roofs.
Aren't they
Every time I
wonderful?
see one of these roofs, I keep thinking, got to get out the mower. You know, I just think it just in Ireland, places like that, you really expect the sod roof, but this isn't a sod roof. This is a
roof with
stays
sod on
or
top of it.
that, and
Yeah,
then
the wood
with
on-
the wood, and then the sod that grows on top. I
Mhm.
guess great insulation, but
Sure.
my goodness, it must rot the wood.
I don't know. Maybe it's preserved some sort of way, you know. But
Well,
anyways,
it must work for them.
it,
huh?
it evidently works.
Okay.
It works for them. So, and speaking about working, here's a little lady here, and she's working on some handicrafts that are for sale. And they also had a larger building, which was around the corner and out of the way, so that all of this remained very, very much intact. But there was a modern building there too, where you could naturally buy souvenirs, because you have to do that, of course, when you visit all these wonderful
Amen.
places, right?
We never
But
go
look at this
anyplace
view,
without that.
Betty. Look at this view over Lillehammer. Isn't this beautiful? It really is nice. I mean,
How
this was a
great thou art.
Oh, indeed, indeed. Anyway, if you, speaking to our viewers now, do visit Norway, make sure that you do visit Lillehammer, and of course this beautiful outdoor museum. This is really wonderful. This is one of two that we saw. Of course, we saw one in Oslo. Also, there's a museum there as well. And this is
That's cute.
isn't that beautiful? See,
Uh-huh.
an artist view of
Depicted
that.
that, huh?
It's
Yeah.
very, very nice. So
And this looks like we would see today, maybe like up at Huntington Lake, or well, not as that rustic, but with a little upstairs like that for the sleeping
a little
quarters.
loft, yeah, sleeping loft,
Uh-huh,
sure,
uh-huh.
sure. Yeah, you want to be up there where the heat rises a little bit, right? Huh?
That's
Get a little
right.
bit warmer.
Uh-huh.
But these buildings are very, very, very nice, and it's great that they were able to put those in there, and I mean to move those from other places in Norway and bring
Yeah,
them there.
that looks like one of the paintings of the man we saw. That was so picture perfect.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful. This is great, and of course we're not too far from the ski area, and that's the area, of course, that we are going to visit next while we are here in Lillehammer. But I wanted everybody to enjoy these beautiful, beautiful shots here from Lillehammer, and of course there's again one more time is the Stave Church and the little lake that we have.
And we're on our way.
This was all part of the Olympic Village.
This is all part, well, these buildings were partly used for the participants, but most of the buildings that they lived in have been moved, but some are still here, as you can see. And you will see they had part of the cross-country tracks. We'll be crisscrossing that, and we will be going up to see the ski jump.
Look at that. Oh my word. Oh, I meant coming out there.
Here we have it, straight ahead. And you can see the levels that the best jumpers arrived at. They have marked those. They have the freestyle hill, and part of the area here is today used still for practicing ski jumping. You can see one of them is covered with this green stuff. Every Saturday they still have practice jumps from here.
And on our next show, we are going to see the skiers as the jumpers, I guess I should say, as they jump there. But that's about all the time that we have now. If you're interested in any of the trips that we do have coming up, please give Betty a call.
At 488-7443.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.